Today I'm going to show you one of the new 7 wonders of the world.
And we have some new guests with us today, and they're going to be live on our show.
Welcome to Around the World with Joshua and Alyssa and baby Jaden. It is episode 126, and today I am going to take you back to Brazil, and I'm going to be there for the next 5 weeks, showing you some things that I didn't really show you as much of the first time I told you about Brazil a long time ago. So let's get started here with the Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio de Janeiro. And this is one of the new 7 wonders of the world. And let me just give you a few facts about it as we show you some of the pictures.
And I need that to go there.
Yeah.
It's on my list.
So the Christ the Redeemer statue was created by a French sculptor and built by a Brazilian. And it was built between 1922 and 1931. And it measures about 100 feet tall, and its arms stretch about 92 feet wide, so it's almost as wide as it is tall. It is made out of reinforced concrete and soapstone, and the original plan, it was supposed to have a globe in one hand and a cross in the other hand, and they later changed it so it just has outstretched arms like we know it today. It weighs about 700 tons, and it is located at the top of the 2,300-foot Corcovado Mountain in Rio de Janeiro.
Wow. It stands out a little bit.
Yeah, there it is. You can see it from almost anywhere in the city there. When it was built in the 1920s, it cost $250,000, which is the equivalent nowadays to $3.8 million. And during the opening ceremony, the statue was supposed to be lit by a lot of floodlights that were turned on remotely from Rome.
What?
Now, there was some bad weather, and so they actually just turned it on location. But it was supposed to be done from the other side of the world.
Because of the ties to the Catholic Church, or was there like some sort of reasoning?
I think because they were showing off the new shortwave radio and what it could do.
Okay.
When I went there in 2016 for the Olympics, the team that I was with, we went up there and we handed out these booklets in 10 different languages that shared the gospel with people. And also while we were up there was a Catholic priest that came up, and this is some kind of little ceremony he was doing for this elderly lady. And once he finished, he found out what we were doing up there, and he told us we had to leave. And the national park people who were up there, they said they were okay with us being up there, but the Catholic priest has authority over them. So they said, sorry, but we have to make you leave, even though we didn't have a problem with it. So we left, and nobody from the team came back with the booklets later on. They came up just to see the statue, but that was kind of sad. When you're standing under the statue of Jesus and you can't share the gospel with people. But that's what the country is like, and so that is the Christ the Redeemer statue. Alyssa still needs to go there to add it to her list of 7 wonders that she has visited.
Yep. I only have 3. I need some more.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, so I have some more missionary story. So you and baby
Right.
Jaden can go hang out somewhere else, and we'll keep going. So we left off last time with Kinza at the kind lady's house, and then Hamid had gotten the job helping the guy with the donuts, and then these boys had come and said that they could help him find food that night. So they shared the bread together, and they hung out for the day, and then once it started to get dark, they headed down the streets, and Hamid kind of thought, like, well, what would happen if they ended up at that same place again where he left his little sister? We thought, probably not. That's probably not where we're going. Well, it was where they were going. And at first he was a little nervous. He got to the alley and he saw the door with the bright light on the inside. and he thought it looked so nice and inviting. He really didn't want to be in the dark at all. He still didn't like that. But he really didn't want anything to happen to Kinza. He thought maybe if they knew that Kinza was his little sister, they wouldn't keep her and take care of her. So his plan was that he was going to go in, but he wasn't going to say anything. Because as long as Kinza didn't hear him, she wouldn't know he was there. So he went in with the other boys, and he kept going back, night after night after night, and he heard things from the teacher, and the teacher talked about the picture of the man on the wall. She explained that the man lived in a beautiful place and that he was God and that he lived in heaven, but he chose to come down to earth and was born like a baby, like a normal person, and grew up and lived a perfect life, and then chose to die on a cross, and he could pay the penalty for sin. And the teacher explained that Jesus wanted to buy back people from their sin. And Hamid thought about it. He thought about how his stepfather had wanted to sell Kinza to that beggar, and how he would have wanted to buy her back if he could, but he knew he didn't have enough money, and that's why they had to run away. He thought, wow, this is amazing. Somebody that didn't even know me chose to buy me back, chose to pay the ultimate price for me so that I could have a home in heaven. And the teacher kept talking, and every night Hamid thought he understood more and more. And one night, most of the boys got their food and they were going out the door, and Hamid kind of sat in the corner in the shadows a little bit. And the teacher came over and she said, "Are you okay?" And Hamid didn't really want to talk, but he kind of mumbled a little bit. And she was really kind, and she kind of talked to him, and she was really gentle. And finally, he kind of opened up and explained that he was just trying to understand, and some of this was starting to make sense to him. He was starting to understand that there was someone who loved him and who cared about him. And the teacher was really happy, and her eyes got really bright. And also, Kinza heard a voice that she knew, and she started to crawl over across the floor because she knew that voice, and that was her brother. And she got up close to him, and she pulled up on him, and she felt his face and immediately smiled and wrapped her arms around his neck. And the nurse said, Are you her brother?" And Hamid was scared again. He didn't want anything to happen to Kinza, and he said, "Yes." She said, "It's okay. We'll still take care of her. But it's good to know that she has family here." She said, "You know what? Most of the boys are gone for the night, and it's pretty late. Why don't you stay here? You can spend the night, and we can talk a little bit more. And I'll just go put Kinza to bed real quick." So she left to put Kinza to bed, and Hamid kind of looked around the room, and he saw a bowl full of eggs. And his first thought was, of course, I need those. I need them to eat. So he grabbed 2 of them, one for each of his hands, and he hid them under his clothes, which are all worn out and dirty. Basically, they look like rags now. And he sat in his little corner, and the lady came back and she said, "Hamid, why don't you come over here? You can come over closer to the fire where there's a little bit more light." And he shook his head. And she knew something was up right away. She knew the little Muslim boys didn't like the darkness at all. There must be something going on. So she motioned for him to come again, and he still said nothing. She said, "Why don't you reach your arms up? I'll help you." And he shook his head again. Well, she picked up his hands, and in the process, he crushed the eggs. And she saw the mess, and Hamid had to hang his head. She knew what had happened. Well, she helped him get all cleaned up. They got him some fresh, clean clothes, and they sat down to talk. And the teacher said, "You know what? Kind of like what happened is what Jesus has done for you. You were a mess. You had a problem. You had all that egg all over you. And you also have a sin problem. And Jesus came to pay the penalty for your sin. He came to buy you back, to take care of that sin problem, and to make you whole again. And you can have a relationship with him. You can talk to him, and he loves you and cares about you. He wants you to know that he is light, and that you don't have to be scared of darkness, and that he cares for you wherever you are." And everything seemed to make sense to this little boy. So that night, Hamid trusted Jesus Christ as his Savior, and he understood that he didn't have to be scared anymore, and that he had a forever friend in Jesus. Now, this is the best moment of the whole story so far, because this is where Hamid doesn't have to be scared, and he's been scared the whole time. But there's still more to the story. There's still a lot of pieces coming, so you're going to have to come and see who else joins the story next time.
Well, speaking of things joining stories,
We have some new visitors today.
yeah, and we are really excited because they are going to come and tell you about their ministry live. They are staying with us right now, and so we'll just let them come in and take over. Their names are Bill and Kathy Britton, and so we'll let them come and
Guys,
introduce
come on in.
themselves and tell you about their ministry.
Hi there. We are so glad to be here with Joshua and Alyssa around the world.
And we're missionaries to Liberia, and we're going to tell you about Liberia and show you some of the animals and food and some of the fun stuff about being a missionary to Liberia.
If you don't know, Liberia is on the west coast of Africa, right near the Atlantic Ocean. It borders it there, and you can see that in the picture.
It's a country with about 5 million people.
And this is a picture of their flag. It looks a lot like the United States flag with the red and white stripes, because the United States kind of helped it to get established as a nation. And on the bottom of the picture is their current president. That is President George Weah.
And he was an international soccer star, and that's one of the things that made him famous.
Liberia has gone through quite a few struggles, and it's because of those struggles that the country is really hurting, and that's why we are so glad that we are able to help. God has really directed our hearts to want to help our Liberian friends. They had a very long 15-year war, and then they had a disease called Ebola, which killed many, many people in Liberia and in some of the other countries nearby.
So it's very easy for some of the Liberians. They've been traumatized, and it's very easy for them to be sad. And it really set their country back, so they really need the help. So we're glad to be able to help out.
We want to first, before we tell you some of the things that we do there, we want to show you some of the pictures of Liberia. Like I said, it's on the coast, so here's a picture of the ocean and a beach right near the water.
It's tropical there. It's very warm, between 83 to 94 degrees, 70 and 80% humidity. And they can grow many things in Liberia, and you're going to see that when we get to the plants. But this is a picture of Monrovia, the capital.
One time we got to ride in a helicopter while we were there, and that was very exciting just to be in a helicopter. But in Liberia, wow, we could look down, we could see the jungle. And when the plants aren't as thick, they call that the bush.
Yeah, it's very lush and green there. And if you're looking down, then we can see a village. And so this clearing is a village where hundreds of people, maybe even thousands of people will live there. But they live in huts that are small, so you don't see high-rise buildings out in the villages, only in the city.
Here's a picture in one of the villages, and the buildings look a little bit different. A lot of them are made from mud bricks. So they have some sand, some mud, little cement, some water, and they can make bricks just on their own.
And this little hut is a very special design. It's called a palava hut. And they store grain in these up in the roof, and it's a thatched roof. And we'd say that it's always like 10 degrees cooler under here. So it's a place where people, you bend over and walk in, and then there'll be benches there. And it's a place for people to meet in the community and talk. And it's just a little wonderful little oasis of the heat from the heat in Liberia.
Sometimes in Liberia, we've had to get around in different ways. Many people ride motorcycles around. One time, we had to ride this raft, and even though we did it one time, many people in this village have to use this raft every day to get from one side of the river to the other. And also while we're there, the roads are it's almost like off-roading, going on really tough, rugged roads with a lot of dips and bends and holes in them. So we have to have a truck like this that
And
can
a
handle
really
the
tough
road.
off-roading truck. So that's our Nissan Patrol. That's
Yeah.
our baby. And then to give you some things about in Liberia, different plants grow there because it's tropical. And one of the things is rubber trees where they make latex rubber. And so they cut the bark of the tree, and if you will, it causes the sap to bleed out. And here they are collecting it in these small buckets. And they collect it, and then they process it, and that makes rubber for all kinds of things, from tires to rubber gloves to all the things that are made out of rubber in our world.
And here's a plant that you might recognize at the very top, the couldn't believe that this is how they grow. But there's a pineapple plant. And the pineapple comes right out of the top.
Yeah,
on
it
a
looks like the
stalk.
plant is presenting you its fruit. It's really pretty. And of course, pineapples are very, very delicious and very sweet, especially when they're picked right from the plant.
And Bill, what do you think those look like?
I don't know. Can you recognize what they are? To me, they look like red peppers, like bell peppers that are red or green, but they're not, are they?
They kind of look like strawberries.
Oh,
too.
do you? Okay. Mm-hmm.
But you want to tell them?
No.
I will.
Those are cashews, and that is the cashew fruit, and you can see the little brown nut on the bottom, and that's inside that shell is the cashew that you eat. And they're very sour. And so we were in the village, we would see kids walking around sucking on the fruit, but they could only keep it in their mouth for a little while. It was like eating a lemon. They'd suck it a little and squint and then put it back in their mouth. And so cashews grow there.
And here's just a picture of what a lot of their everyday food looks like. In this picture, the rice looks green, but it isn't really usually green. It's more white or kind of brownish, like brown rice. And so they'll have like a soup with it, and often fish and vegetables in that gravy kind of a soup.
That one's green because of what they mixed in that rice.
Yeah.
But rice is the basic thing they eat. They also eat something called cassava. And cassava, they make fufu, and that's a very interesting meal because it's not quite a solid and it's not quite a liquid. And there's not a picture of, maybe that's fufu there in one of the pictures, but I wish I could spoon it out for you so you could see that it's thick, but it won't stick to the spoon, but it's very thick, and they love to eat it.
Now I want to show you a few animals. I wish we had put something near it so you could actually see how big this is. But this is
He's
a
about that.
millipede.
He's probably about that long.
Yeah, a very wide.
Big chunky millipede.
And then here's some army ants. And I did put my foot in this picture so you could see how small they are and all this big long row of ants.
And they follow each other, and they say if you can get them to go in a circle, they will continue to go in a circle because all they do is follow the ant in front of them.
And this bug is kind of hard to see because he's laying on his back, but that's a cockroach. The reason why he's laying on his back is because in the middle of the night before, I was asleep, and then all of a sudden I felt something scurry down my face and onto my body, and I immediately woke up and I was knocking it off of me, and in the morning we found, here's Mr. Cockroach on the ground, like he couldn't turn himself over.
And that's my foot, just to give you an idea how the size of the cockroach. And then the next picture, this is a land crab. And then the next picture, you have someone who's, someone who's moving, is just kind of poking at the land crab, because we also wanted you to see the size of the land crab.
Then here's a very interesting animal. I had not seen one until I went there. This is a pangolin. It's related to the anteater, and that's what this animal eats, and people will have this as a pet. And
they call it an ant bear over there. And you can see how friendly it is. And of course, Kathy's holding it in her hands, and I'm taking the pictures.
And when it gets afraid, as protection, you can see it has scales on it, but it will curl right up in a ball, and animals can't eat it as easily when it does that.
We were doing a mobile medical clinic, and I heard this high screeching noise, and then I looked over at the crowd, and there was a woman there with this small animal, and she was actually trying to sell me the animal for $10, and they said it was a, what'd they call it?
Duo.
A duo. And I didn't know what animal that was, but later on I was able to ask my other librarian friends what animal it is, and it was a mongoose, a baby mongoose. It was so soft and furry and cuddly, and it loved when I scratched its neck. It almost went to sleep in my hands. I really should have bought it to play with it for a few days, even though I knew I couldn't bring it back to the United States. Then I just would have given it to one of my friends, but it stayed with that lady.
There's a children's book that can tell you a story about a mongoose, and it's called Ricky Tikki Tavi.
Yes.
And most libraries would have a copy of it.
And this is just a picture of a lady farming. They're very poor in Liberia, and most people are subsistence farmers. That means they just grow enough food for them to eat for their family and maybe a little to sell for a little money for the family. But most all the farming is done not with a tractor, just with that hoe that she's hoeing the ground with. So it's hard work. And then also this picture is kind of illustrate, it doesn't show, but we talk about some of the religions that are in Liberia, and some of them are ancient religions, and they're polytheistic, and they believe sometimes in overarching God, but all these little gods and spirits that wreak havoc in your life. It's not a positive thing. And so many people don't know about a God that loves them personally. And many people do in Liberia, and the people who do know Jesus Christ as their Savior are sharing that message with others, and we're helping them do that. And we're also helping the country in a lot of different ways. In each one of these, what we'll call icons here, these pictures describe how we do that.
One of the main ways is through medical outreach. They have very, very little medical care in Liberia.
And people can die of simple diseases because they don't get help and aren't able to go to the hospital or see a doctor.
So this is a clinic that our mission board, ABWE, helped to start. And they see about 50 to 80 patients a day, and they share the gospel with the patients. And a lot of the care there is free. And so it's a great help to the people.
Mm-hmm. They treat a lot of tropical diseases like typhoid and dengue fever and malaria and things like that.
And they give a lot of shots to kids like you. I know every kid gets their shots as you're growing up, and so they do that too.
Another way to expand medical care is also to train people to do medical care. Now, a physician assistant is higher level in medical knowledge than a nurse, but not quite a doctor. So this is a program where they train young people to become physician's assistants, very smart, hardworking young people, and then of course they become physician's assistants, and they go out and they're also taught the Bible, so they're not only sharing the gospel, teaching the Bible, but they're also helping people physically with their medical needs, and it's a great thing that they do. But one of the things is they needed a bus to be able to take their students so they could visit hospitals and clinics, so they could work under doctors and nurses and other physicians' assistants to get training, but they needed a bus to get them to where they needed to go. And so Kathy and I were able just to talk to one church only and said that we needed this bus. And God provided it through only talking to one church about it, and soon it's going to be shipped to Liberia to bring those students to the hospitals and the clinics where they need to work. So we're just praising the Lord for that.
Very exciting. And last January, we brought our first medical team in from the United States to go over and help in Africa. And they had a great time. And this is kind of what it looked like in a village where we did some medical outreach.
Hundreds of people will be waiting for us before we even get there to try to get medical care.
Right, because there's so little there. And the fact that we were coming and bringing this care for free and giving them free medicine, it just really gets their attention. And this is what the village looked like if I just turned around from that other building you saw.
And that's a goat right there. And then this is one of the pastors who's sharing the gospel with people. Now, the people didn't need to hear about, we asked them if they wanted to hear about God, but they didn't need to hear about God to get the medical care. We just offered that. But I would tell you this, the Liberians are so glad for the help that they're more than interested in hearing about the Bible and the gospel. And so here's a pastor who's sharing the gospel with people. And the last medical trip that we went on, in 2 days we served 300 patients, and 90 people trusted Jesus Christ as their Savior, which is an amazing amount. But I think it's because the need is there and the openness of the people, and God has just blessed the whole outreach.
So the gospel is spreading, and then an evangelist, we'll talk about that in a minute, will come to that village again, and that will help to start a church. But here's a couple more pictures of our medical outreach. That's Dr. Jack Sorg on the right. He's an ABWE missionary. He's been a doctor for years, and he led our team. And then this is Bob, and on the wall you can see a white thing with a whole bunch of pockets in that. In those pockets are the different medicines that the doctor prescribed for the people.
From antibiotics to all kinds of things for parasites and all different kinds of illnesses that they have in Liberia.
And then his wife Kathy helped to give glasses to those people who needed them, because people, like Bill said, who are mostly subsistence farmers, often do not even have the money to buy glasses if they need them.
So these are reading glasses, and so this is very important, especially if they need to read and to work close up. As you get older, you lose your ability to see close up.
And like we said, people trust Christ through these medical clinics, and then an evangelist or a missionary pastor will come back to these towns, and because there have been many people who've trusted Christ because of the clinic outreaches, it's the beginning of a church. So we help our friends in planting churches.
Now that there is an old water bottle, but they bang on it, and that's the bell to tell people that it's time for church. And then this church is actually in a Muslim village. About 15 to 20% of the people in Liberia are Muslim, and they need to hear the gospel too. And they were interested in the gospel because we as Christians came there with free medical care, and that made all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm. And also, you could see these buildings look a little different. And here's a church that doesn't even have a regular building yet. Hopefully they're going to be getting one soon. But just to show you different stages and different types of buildings in different parts of the country. Here's the one in Banga that we go to the most when we're over there.
In this picture is one of the motorcycles that we raised money for motorcycles because when you plant a church way out in the bush, way out in the country, then you have to assign a pastor because no one is mature enough in the Lord to teach the Bible. So these pastors have to go from church to church, and the easiest way to do that is with a motorcycle. And so we started off by raising money for 7 motorcycles. How many motorcycles are we up to now?
We're up to like 14, I think.
Yeah, so it's fun because we're going to give away like 4 or 5 more motorcycles to the missionary pastors next time we're in Liberia. But in Liberia, it's one of the things about it is because the country was so devastated by the war, most places don't even have electricity. So we always have to give people resources that they can use without electricity, and these are some of the Bibles.
Right, these are study Bibles that we brought in. At that time we brought in 33, and we just ordered 12 more today that are coming in, and we'll bring those in the next time for some of the pastors. And along with that, we have connected with a mission called Experience Mission in central Pennsylvania, and they have different items which help to you can use as tools for evangelism. These are packets of seeds, and of course, as Bill said, so many people are farmers, they can use seeds. So it's just a tool to build a relationship with your neighbor, to show love to your neighbor, to give them some seed packets that they can plant in their garden to help feed their family. And we gave enough out so that a family could use some of the seeds for their own garden too.
So here we are distributing 2,000 packets of seeds. We gave to each family, they got 4 packets, 2 for them and 2 to give to their neighbors to talk to them about the Lord or invite them to church.
Mm-hmm. And also at these church conferences that we go to, they will, in the afternoons, share the gospel with people in the village that our conference is in. And so here we are, maybe you've heard of the wordless book, or maybe seen a wordless bracelet, where it has the different colors that represent Bible truths. And so here we are praying with some of the men and the evangelists who are going to go out and do that in the village. And we have a whole little box full of the bracelets that a church group made for us.
So we were praying for them. It didn't make sense for us to go out with them because we did not know the local language, but they did. And they said 100 people trusted Christ through the distribution and talking to people about the gospel through the wordless bracelet.
And also because, as Bill said earlier, the pastors need training, we brought a team in, and we're bringing another one in a couple months here to help train the pastors. These are some of the guys who came with us, and one of the pastors brought 2 of his teenagers there. And they first spoke at one of these conferences with hundreds of people.
Oh yeah, there was over 300 people there.
Isn't that a cool building? They make it all out of bamboo and palm leaves.
And it's just to keep the sun off you because it's so hot in Liberia. It won't keep the rain out.
And then here we are at the training. We also were able to buy some books and bring them with them.
And those are all the pastors who are showing off some of the resources that we gave them. But Liberia is very interesting because it's a country that's people who, the older people don't live very long because of the bad medical care, but then after the war, there was a lot of babies that were born. So Liberia, 70% of the people are under the age of 30, and 44% of the people are under the age of 15. So there's a lot of kids there. So we needed to do ministries to reach kids.
And so 2 of those things are, the first one is a Christian high school. A lot of times they'll have schools that are for elementary or middle school, but not very often high school. So we're helping our friends to start that.
In this school, even though it only goes up to 9th grade, has over 350 students who attend it.
So even the last time we were there, we were helping them by getting some of the books that the teachers will need when the school starts. And we also bought some books, the ones on the right, all those white books, for some of the kids in the elementary school.
Most
too.
kids in those schools don't have any books of their own. So when they even go to class, their lesson will all be written on a chalkboard, and then they'll have to copy it into maybe their notebooks if they're fortunate enough to have them.
And another thing we are helping our friends over there do is to start a Christian camp. Right in this picture, you're seeing us standing on part of the 25 acres of land. So right now, we're working with a camp in Michigan to
Called Lake Ann Camp.
to learn how to run a camp and to train their counselors. And in a couple months, 4 of the staff from Lake Ann are coming over to Liberia to help lead a camp and do some training. And we're working with the ABWA project office about buildings. And so it's really just kind of starting to get off the ground, and we're very excited about it, and so are our partners.
And as we get toward the end here, we just want to show you some pictures of the people, their beautiful smiling faces, and some of the beautiful ladies and men. These 2 men were both former Muslims who trusted Jesus Christ as their Savior. You can see the Spirit of God and the joy that's in their lives. And some of just beautiful kids and people. And then we finish off with this picture, because this is a beautiful young Liberian girl, and we don't know how to read her face. It's just one of those things where we don't know what the expression means, but we know this. We know that the gospel of Jesus Christ brings hope. And so that's why we're in Liberia. And so we want to bring hope to the eyes of people like her and young people like her.
We're so glad that we could share with you today. If you think of us, please pray for us in the ministry over there and our friends who are working to share the gospel so that the people in Liberia can know about Jesus Christ too.
Nice talking to you.
Thank you so much for joining us and for our missionaries to come and visit, be live here with you today. Make sure you come back and see us again next time.
Yep, we will see you then.
Bye.
Bye.